In a dense forest in the far north, where the rain never seems to stop, there lives a stray cat named Milo. Milo is not like other cats. His fur is as bright orange as the sun, his eyes are as blue as the mist. On his head, Milo always wears an old straw hat, which he picked up from a hunter who left it in the forest many years ago. The hat not only protects Milo from the rain, but is also the only thing that makes him feel like he is not alone. Milo lives alone, wandering through small streams and towering trees, hunting mice and fish to survive. But deep down, Milo always longs for a friend, someone who can share the sad, rainy days in this cold forest with him. One day, when the rain in the forest became more intense than ever, Milo was taking shelter under a large rock when he heard a low growl coming from afar. The roar was not that of a ferocious predator, but one of pain and despair. Curious and worried, Milo decided to follow the sound, despite the pouring rain that soaked his fur. After a while of walking through thorny bushes and muddy puddles, Milo stopped at a sight that made his little heart pound. A giant white bear, its once pure white fur now covered in mud, was curled up on the bank of a stream. One of the bear's legs was caught in a hunter's iron trap, blood flowing from the wound mixing with the cold water. The bear's eyes, a deep blue, were filled with pain and fear. Milo stood still for a moment, his instincts as a small cat making him want to run away. But then, when he saw the bear's eyes, a feeling of sympathy arose in his heart. Milo had been abandoned by humans, had been hurt, and he knew what it was like to be alone and helpless. Without further hesitation, Milo stepped closer, the straw hat on his head swaying in the wind. The bear, whom Milo would later call Kale, was startled to see a small creature like Milo approaching. Kale let out a weak roar, as if to warn Milo not to come near. But Milo was not afraid. He sat down in front of Kale, looked straight into the bear's eyes, and meowed softly, as if to say, "Don't be afraid, I'll help you." Milo didn't know how to open the iron trap, but he didn't give up. With his small feet and sharp claws, Milo tried to pry each iron piece apart. The rain continued to fall, and it was cold, but Milo didn't stop. After hours of struggling, the trap finally opened, and Kale was free. The white bear let out a roar filled with pain, but also gratitude. It bowed its head, gently touching Milo's nose as a thank you. From that moment on, a strange friendship began to blossom between two seemingly incompatible creatures. Kale, a majestic but lonely polar bear, had lost his family in an avalanche many years ago. Milo, a small stray cat, had never known the warmth of a home. They found in each other the comfort they had longed for. In the days that followed, Milo and Kale became inseparable friends. Milo often sat on Kale's back as they walked through the forest, his straw hat shielding them from the rain. Kale, with his strength, protected Milo from other predators, while Milo helped Kale find small fish in the streams, something Kale loved, but was not skillful enough to catch. They shared every meal, every moment, and the cold forest suddenly became warmer than ever. One morning, while Milo and Kale were resting by the stream, they discovered a woven bamboo basket lying alone on the rocks. Inside the basket were pieces of fresh meat, the aroma of which was irresistible to both Milo and Kale. Kale, with the instinct of a bear, immediately devoured a large piece of meat, while Milo only dared to eat a small piece because he was still shy. But strangely, after eating, Kale began to feel tired. The bear's eyes became dull, and it lay down panting. Milo panicked, not understanding what was happening. It meowed continuously, trying to wake Kale up, but the bear only whispered, "Milo, be careful, something's wrong." Milo realized that the basket of meat had not appeared by chance. It smelled a strange smell from the remaining meat, a chemical smell that it had smelled when it lived near humans. It was a sleeping drug, something hunters often use to trap large animals. Milo understood that if Kale did not wake up, both of them would be in danger. With all his strength, Milo pulled Kale into a nearby cave for shelter. The rain was still falling outside, but Milo did not care. He lay close to Kale, using his warm fur to warm his big friend. All night long, Milo did not sleep, just sat there, meowing softly like a lullaby, hoping that Kale would wake up. The next morning, Kale finally opened his eyes. The bear looked at Milo, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved me again, Milo," Kale said, his voice deep. Milo only meowed in response, but inside he was filled with joy. From then on, the two decided to be more careful, and they began to find out who had put the basket of meat there. Over the following days, Milo and Kale discovered that their forest was no longer safe. Human footprints appeared more and more, along with iron traps and signs of destruction. Trees were cut down, and small animals in the forest became panicked. Milo and Kale realized that a group of hunters had come to this forest, and their target was big animals like Kale. One afternoon, while Milo and Kale were foraging for food, they were suddenly ambushed. A group of hunters emerged from the bushes, carrying guns and nets. Kale, with his protective instinct, immediately stood in front of Milo, roaring fiercely. But Milo knew that Kale could not fight a whole group of people. In the moment of danger, Milo jumped on Kale's back and meowed loudly, as if to say, "Run, Kale." Kale understood. With his strength, the bear rushed through the hunters, carrying Milo on his back. Arrows and bullets whizzed past their heads, but Kale did not stop. They ran through streams, through thorn bushes, until the forest became quiet again. But Kale was wounded. An arrow was stuck in his shoulder, blood dripping. Milo was heartbroken to see Kale injured while protecting him. It used its small claws to pull out the arrow, then licked Kale's wound, trying to ease the pain. Kale smiled weakly, saying, "Don't worry, Milo. As long as you're safe, I can handle it." But Milo couldn't stop crying. The little cat's tears fell onto Kale's white fur, mixing with the endless rain of the forest. After the attack, Milo and Kale decided they had to leave the forest. They couldn't continue living here while hunters were still lurking. Kale spoke of a faraway land to the north, where there were white snowfields and no people. "We'll be safe there, Milo," Kale said, his voice filled with hope. But the journey to that land was not easy. Kale grew weaker and weaker from his injuries, and Milo had to do everything he could to help his friend. He hunted fish, found leaves to cover Kale's wounds, and was always there to comfort the bear. Milo's straw hat was now tattered, but he still wore it as a symbol of his resilience. One night, as they stopped by a small stream, Kale suddenly collapsed. The bear's wound had become infected, and he no longer had the strength to continue. Kale looked at Milo, his blue eyes clouded with pain. "Milo, I'm afraid I can't go on," Kale whispered. Milo was panicking. He meowed continuously, trying to wake Kale up. But the bear just smiled sadly. "You have to go on, Milo, to the land of snow and live a happy life. Don't worry about me." But Milo wouldn't let it. He lay down next to Kale, hugging his big friend with his little legs. "I won't leave you, Kale. We promise to always be together," Milo meowed, his voice trembling. That night, in the cold rain of the forest, Milo lay close to Kale, using his small body to warm the bear. He sang a lullaby with soft meows, hoping for a miracle. And then, at the first light of dawn, Kale opened his eyes. The bear had survived the crisis thanks to Milo's love and perseverance. Every morning, as the first rays of sunlight hit the sparkling snowfield, Milo would climb onto Kale's back, his straw hat now faded but still worn proudly. Together they would traverse the icy hills, hunt for fish under the thin ice, and sometimes simply lie in the snow, gazing up at the deep blue sky above. Milo was no longer the little stray cat he once was. He had grown older, his bright orange fur streaked with silver, but his blue eyes still shone with joy and gratitude. Kale was the same. The scar on his shoulder from the arrow had healed, but it always reminded the bear of the hard times they had overcome together. Every time he saw Milo meowing happily, Kale would smile, filled with joy at having found a true companion. One cold winter day, when the snowflakes were falling harder than ever, Milo and Kale found a small, warm cave in the middle of a snowfield. They decided to rest there, huddled together for warmth. Milo took off his straw hat, placed it beside him, and looked at Kale with gentle eyes. "Kale, do you remember the old rainforest?" Milo meowed, his voice small but full of emotion. Kale nodded, his blue eyes shining with memories. "I do, Milo. Those rainy days, we went through it all together. Without you, I don't know what I would have done." The bear lowered its head, nuzzling Milo's nose, just as it had the first time they met. Milo smiled, his eyes sparkling. "Me too, Kale. You gave me a family, a place to belong. No matter how many rains or snowfields we go through, I will always be by your side." With that, Milo curled up, nestling close to Kale's white fur, and the two fell into a peaceful sleep with the gentle sound of the snow wind outside the cave. The story of Milo and Kale ends here, but I hope that their journey has left you with warm and meaningful emotions. Friendship, sacrifice, and loyalty are timeless values, and I am happy to share this story with all of you. I sincerely thank you for listening. Thank you, and see you in the next stories.